is happy to be here, but she's also got to take care of her cat because she did, just as Bob Barker used to tell all of us Price is Right viewers, have your pets spayed or neutered. And she did just that. And the little kitty's a bit delirious today. So she's going to be occasionally preoccupied. But welcome to the book club for movies. I'm Samir Roy, and who do we have here over there in your corner, Amy?
Hi, it's me, Amy, and little Lydia, who might be going wild at some point. But hey, guys, we're happy to be here. It's Monday. We're kicking off the 45th week of the book club for movies. Let's just go ahead and get into things. We will be talking about...
Do I sound congested? Maybe I am.
I don't think so. We will be talking about Vincent Price, our Man Crush Monday for the day. But before that, let's start talking about Hook. Hook was our pick from Friday. It was Crystal's pick, Crystal being one of our Patreons. This is one that she picked. This is her cult classic Friday pick. What was it like watching this movie again, Samir?
I still enjoyed it. I think it's one of those movies that I enjoy on a camp level. So, it's all about, this movie is so excessive in so many ways. Clearly Steven Spielberg was having some sort of like midlife crisis moment and really just let it all out in every possible way.
I think that's a good way.
So I appreciate it on this total excess level where, everything is just so over the top. Like the set design is just insane in this movie. It's like they literally did not know where to stop with so many things. But especially with the sets, I think is like the area specifically where it goes the furthest. So at first, it's like, you love the house of Wendy Darling, and it's very sweet and cute, and they're in London. And like I said, that little hook, like, window latch, I still want that thing for, I don't have a window that has latches, but I still want it. Maybe it's like the actual latch over a door. I'll make that it or something. I don't know. I'll figure out a way, but I still want that piece. But then you get to like Neverland, and there's so many things that just defy explanation in this world that you kind of give up trying to find any kind of logic to any of it in the movie. You just kind of go with the flow. But the moments that stood out the most for me still are the ones that made me laugh when I was a kid. Like the insult war at the Lost Boys banquet table. And I'm like, how is this kid from the Lost Boys supposed to understand a dig like nearsighted gynecologist? But he understands it nonetheless. But I just love it when he like loses the battle and then they all start calling out Pan's name. And he's like, Rufio, like trying to get them to call his name again. I don't know why. That always made me laugh hysterically. I think maybe we weren't supposed to be laughing at him in that moment, but unfortunately that was the effect. So there was lots of things like that. I was still think you could have cut out all of Julia Roberts' lines from this movie and it would have been fine.
Yeah, I like her, but I hated as much as I like her, I mean, I don't think she's quite as good enough of an actress to maybe like pull off this Tinkerbell voice that I'm thinking of. Sorry, it's really stormy outside, so if anyone hears anything flying into my house, checking, making sure everything's okay.
It's very windy here today too, so the winds are howling outside.
Yeah,
appropriate for today's movie.
Price today. Yeah, but whenever she was like the Tinkerbell pixie size, I think they like did something to her voice that was like really annoying. Just made it a little. I can't even do it. It was just
a little higher.
Yeah, but then when that one part where she's the full-grown Julia Roberts, she didn't have that. I was like, finally, it's just Julia Roberts. But I spent a lot of my time while watching this movie looking on IMDb, as I do during a lot of movies.
Yes.
But I was looking at all of these child actors and saw that a lot of them never really had careers after this movie. Including the boy, the one who plays Robin Williams' son. I had also seen him, of course, in What About Bob, and he's really good in that. But then this was like his last movie, and then he's like a law professor now or something. So
Yeah.
successful in his own right, just didn't really continue the acting career.
But what about the little girl? She like, oh, I
Same
love
thing.
her
Yeah,
song in
she
this
was just like,
movie.
yeah, like
Oh,
nothing. And like half the Lost Boys too is the same thing. Some of them are still acting, and they're like in their 40s now.
yeah, one of them was the little boy Luke from The Witches. He's one of the Lost Boys in this movie, and they recognized him. Um, I don't know what happened to Rufio. For some reason, I get the
Oh yeah,
vibe
nothing, no acting career.
no acting with him. Darn. But I loved the little girl. She was she's just like such a natural like child actor. Like you just
Yeah,
felt
she's cute.
so much for her. She could do so much with just a look and like the sound of her voice. And she sings that one song, and I'm like, I'm kind of glad it wasn't a musical because I like that special moment where she sings in the movie, and I feel like if the movie was full of musical numbers, that one song wouldn't have quite the same effect, I think, because it comes out of nowhere in a way, and everybody's kind of captivated by it. Like even all these surly guys are like everybody wants to call their parents in that moment, I guess. So I love that moment for that. So I'm not mad that it didn't become a musical in the end.
Yeah, but Hook to me still, I think having to do with, or it might be a generational thing, but maybe not, because there are a lot of people younger than me that love this movie too. But I think just seeing this movie a little bit later, not really as a kid, I wasn't as obsessed with it. And then also watching it as like this being a Steven Spielberg movie, I'm like, it's just not. I mean, if someone made me had to pick one Steven Spielberg movie that was my favorite, I wouldn't even this wouldn't even be a thought in my mind.
Well, I don't think it would be for other people either. I think if they were going to make
No,
that
no,
that
but
choice, they would obviously choose something more like Munich or,
good
you know,
Jaws. Oh yeah, Munich.
E.T.,
Oh,
like
so good.
there's so many other things that you would think of first. So that's why I said this movie doesn't have that same kind of reputation. So you also haven't grown up since the movie came out with it being drilled into your head. This is a
You're
great
just like,
movie.
I
This
haven't
is a
grown up.
brilliant. This is what it's. I guarantee you that if this had a different critical reception and all the majority opinion on it, like would have been that this is a great film, and that's like that would have been in your head by the time you got to it. And it does, like it happens for all of us. We're like when we're younger, you're just sort of believe when you're told something is great, and then you grow up thinking that until you get to all of us get to a point where we look at something again and we're like, oh, I thought that maybe I was wrong when I was 22.
Yeah,
Like it's possible,
it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable.
so this movie doesn't
Yeah.
have that going behind it as well. So I think it's always going to be kind of a cult thing, which made it a perfect choice for a cult classic Friday, I think, because
Agree.
there is still that devoted group who will always love it. I always laugh also about how much they pad Robin Williams in the movie. Like he's so padded to make him look fat and bloated. And then when it's like, oh, now he's figured out who he is and he remembers, then suddenly like all the padding goes and he's instantly
I
skinny
didn't
again.
even notice that they kept calling him fat. I was like, he's not fat.
Did you not know at the beginning he definitely is, like they've added
Honestly,
padding.
I didn't even notice that.
And so
Like,
you see all these shots
if they did
of
that padding, he still doesn't
oh
look
no
fat to me.
oh no he looks fat. You need to pay closer attention because they even show specific shots of his belly like rippled, the fat rippled over itself on his sides when he's sitting down, like on the plane and stuff. There's specific shots
I was too busy looking at the IMDb careers.
They're constantly doing shots specifically just of his midsection before you even get to his face, so that you get the idea. Like they overkill on trying to tell you that he's fat before he's suddenly not pan.
Yeah.
Maybe because I used to be skinny and now I'm much more overweight. I'm a lot more conscious of it. But I also noticed where Spielberg highlights that like many times to give you, this is how much he's changed. He has a pretty bad dad. In the beginning, like that moment where he yells at the kids, it's just like, it was a really real moment. Like I was really upset for those children. They looked so devastated and scared of their dad. It felt that was like a real moment that Steven Spielberg was actually able to capture there. And I love this speech from his wife where she's like, this is the only time in our kids' lives where they're chasing after us for attention. They want our attention. And in a few more years, like we're going to be chasing after them, begging them to spend time with us. Like, you're missing this whole thing. Like, you have all your priorities screwed up. So I thought that was a sincere moment, but then, it makes like, oh, is Steven Spielberg wondering if he's not spending enough time with his kids right now? Is this how he sees himself? So I feel like there's some self-reflection worked into it, but then he lets his worst tendencies sort of come out, and he just doesn't rein them in. So that's, like I said, that's what I mean by the excess of it. Since I appreciate how much it goes over the top. It's like, it's a pretty pure expression of where Steven Spielberg's at. I don't think we ever thought of him as like perhaps the most mature. As a storyteller, he's great, but there's something about the storytelling in and of itself that feels childlike in some way permanently. Like, there's always a contrast or like a struggle or a tension between like the adult subject matter and a sort of very simple view of everything that Spielberg kind of projects. And so when he's faced with a tougher subject, that tension becomes really artistically interesting. And then with something that's not quite as challenging, he just lets himself go wild. And I think he just went wild here. And I don't mind a wild swing from Spielberg. It's, aesthetically pleasing. It had a lot of really fun moments. So tons of little cameos, like Phil Collins as the detective when the kids go missing. Gwyneth Paltrow as Wendy. Glenn Close as the Boo Box pirate, which also that moment still disturbs me more now than it did it as a kid. I'm like, okay, they just killed that pirate with scorpions.
Yeah, no, and she's like, actually screaming. Like, Glenn Close is this great dramatic actress.
Giving a real performance.
Like, genuine terror for like they're dragging her and she's screaming and
they're like laughing as they're dropping in scorpions, and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, but it's fun. Certainly a fun movie. I'm glad I got to watch it again. If people didn't see this, it's on Netflix.
Yes, thank God. So you can watch it over and over again whenever you're having a bad day.
Thank you, Crystal, for picking this. She says, this film has always made me very happy. But thank you for picking this as one of our Patreons. We appreciate it. It's Monday. It's Man Crush Monday. And not even knowing what the weather was going to be like, we picked a stormy character, but oh so dashing, and one of the most iconic speaking voices ever, Mr. Vincent Price. I can't even do his voice. Yeah. Handsome dude. Very, very dashing.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Vincent Price, I mean, the actor, the voice, the cook.
He was an author. He was an artist.
I didn't know about till today. Yeah, an avid art collector. Really had a lot going on.
Yep, she left. Hello, Mom. Yes, as Amy was saying, that Vincent Price, more than just being a horror icon, as he's known today, he actually was one of the few true Renaissance men of Hollywood. He was really well educated in more than one field, to the point at which he also became sort of like a household name for art history and art appreciation. Like, there's a point in his life, even when he was contracted by Sears to curate an art collection that would be sold through their department stores in the 60s. And I think they moved like 50,000 pieces of art, ranging in price from $10 to $3,500. And people were allowed to put things on layaway. And they were like real works of art before like major artists were trending. So even people who went to his house when he was older, they said that they always saw art in his house. It was abstract, it was new. And he had things by like Pollock. He knew who the big artists were going to be. He collected their art early. He was like one of the great art historians of our country, and also one of these iconic actors. It's amazing.
Yeah. There's still an art museum in his name in I think he and his wife have donated a lot of things.
Did you know he was invited to do a lecture series on art by that college. And he was so impressed and moved by the students. It was a largely Latino and Latina student body. And he was so impressed and moved by the questions, their curiosity, their talent, that he, in the end, donated his personal art collection and the money to take care of it to that college. So there is a Vincent Price collection at this college still to this day that he left in his will to them. And because he just loved those students so much when they invited him to do this lecture series there. It's like there's so many fun and fascinating things about his life that really start popping up when you start looking into it. Like what else did you discover in looking him up today?
Well, just some basic facts. He was born May 27th, 1911 in St. Louis, Missouri. His grandfather, Vincent Clarence Price, invented Dr. Price's baking powder, which was the first cream of tartar-based baking powder, and made their family very wealthy. So he did come from money. He's one of the people where he could trace his ancestry all the way back to the Mayflower. Was in theater for quite a while. And then got into character roles starting in the late 1930s. Was in some big things. He would be in things with like Boris Karloff. He was in the Ten Commandments, just like these epics.
And also in the movie Laura, which had a very famous theme that became a radio hit and everything. He got to play these different roles before he was a horror icon, and one of the best ones was in Laura and Leave Her to Heaven, 2 movies he made with Gene Tierney that are also highly recommended. But keep going. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there because he did that before we got to Ten Commandments.
Than I do. But he eventually certainly became known for his horror roles, almost predominantly, but certainly had horror films earlier in his career as well. In the 1960s, he started making a lot of films with Roger Corman, and those became super popular in all of these like Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. Certainly known for his voiceover work, or just like his radio appearances that he would do. Later on, he would do like the narration on a lot of like animated shorts, including most famously Vincent, the Tim Burton short that we have talked about a few times on this show.
And then of course Thriller.
Yep, can't forget Thriller.
And as Luke has pointed out, he also did the voice of the villain Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective.
Ratigan. Oh, it's been so long since I've seen that movie. I do like that one.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but he really had a very prolific career. And another thing we had found out was that he was also quite the gourmet chef and wrote a few cookbooks and also had a cooking show for a little bit. And I knew nothing about that. And Samir and I definitely looked up where we could find his cooking books because I want one, or I want Samir to get one and tell me how it is, and then I can get one.
There is a first edition of one that he and his son, I think, edited together. There's a first edition of it on Etsy right now that I'm like, it's expensive, so I'm like, may have to put that on a layaway plan. But it's really in really beautiful condition. But yeah, he was actually married 3 times. I think he had at least three kids. I can't remember.
I think he had 2 kids and 3 wives. His last wife had died, but just looking at this so he died in 93, I believe. Yes, October 20th, 93. But he has 211 acting credits. All the way up to 93, the year he died. There is one random one in 2002.
That's probably just he used his voice in something, so pre-recorded thing from another movie.
TV shows. He was in. He was in a lot of the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, playing Vincent Van Ghoul.
He was also in the Batman TV show. I think he was. His was the Egghead, and.
Yeah,
With tons of fun puns. Like he just had that I love his, like you said, it's his voice. His voice was probably the most iconic thing. And it was really, I think after the movie we're talking about today, he didn't do too many movies after that. And he sort of went more towards voiceover work. And, and so his sort of heyday had sort of was coming to an end. And then when Thriller came along, it was like a big boost. Like he was keeping himself relevant by doing all these other things. But then when he got that gig, it was like the most perfect voice for that voiceover. And it made him a superstar again. I was just watching a clip of him on the Joan Rivers when she had a talk show way back when, in the 80s. And she actually had him and Anthony Perkins on together on the show. But before Anthony Perkins comes on, it's like, Vince, I can't have you on here and not have you do the Thriller thing. Will you do it for us? And they even set up the lighting to do it. And he did his whole laugh. And like that laugh is so iconic. People know the sound of that laugh. Even if you don't know Vincent Price, I think everybody knows the sound of that laugh because they know the song Thriller. They know that video. They know, so that sound of his voice is so iconic just from that. And there was actually a really beautiful story on, sorry, stupid little flies in my face. I was trying to ignore, but I couldn't. Just like in the movie, because he was in The Fly. I didn't hear it talking to me though, so I think I was okay to swat it away. Was not a scientist. I promise. But there was this wonderful story I heard on this podcast that I love called Anything Ghost. And somebody who wrote in one of their stories, it wasn't a ghost story. It was just a story about Vincent Price and how when he was still alive, her kids had seen the Thriller video. And so from there, she showed them his movies because her kids were interested in the person who did this voice. So she's like, oh, well, let's look up his films. So she got as many of the films as she could. And she had always loved Vincent Price and she had passed this love on down to her kids. And somehow I forgot what it was that they had done, but they wrote to him. They wrote like a fan letter to him because they're like, oh, let's write something to him then. And they mailed it to him. They're like, if you want to call us, here's our phone number. And then lo and behold, they get a phone call. And it's Vincent Price who's called them back, who's thanking them for the lovely letter and how sweet it was. And then she's like, oh my gosh, she gets her kids in and the kids are like, oh my, she's like, guess who's on the phone? And he does the laugh for them on the phone. And the kids were like, oh my God. They were like so happy. And then he sent them gifts. Like the rest of his life, he stayed in contact with this little family. And like sent letters. He sent copies of his cookbooks to them. And the wife, she's like, oh, I made this one for my family today. They all really loved it. And he loved this interaction with this. This is just one random person who sent a letter. Who knows how many more people he was this loving to. But like it lasted all the way until he died, and he sent copies of all his films on videotapes. He sent signed photos, and he just kept sending them little things to say, and they, like I said, they became friends. And then when he was getting older and dying, and he was saying, oh, I haven't been as active and I'm so cold all the time. So like the mom like knitted him a big blanket so that he could keep his legs warm in his wheelchair. And like she left things to them in his will that he sent them another. I was just like, this is the kind of person he was. On top of, he was such a renaissance. He was so smart. He was so educated, so debonair, so talented. And he didn't really ever get to show everyone all of his talent. And so, but in this movie, you really get a great picture of just how amazing he was as an actor, because he gets to play so many different types of characters. You get the pathos that he's capable of. You get the high comedy. You get the horror elements. You get all of it in this film. So I think this movie is really a wonderful testament to his talents, because it is so much fun to watch.
And the film, of course, is Theater of Blood, which I think is just an incredible title. This came out in 1973, directed by Douglas Hickox. A Shakespearean actor takes poetic revenge on the critics who denied him recognition. I already know I'm just going to love this.
You are.
As an actor. What made you pick this film over other Vincent Price films? I kind of forgot, because it's been a while now, over a month since we worked on our January calendar. I was like, why did we pick this one again? Like, I know we were going to do Vincent Price. But
I think it was just because this movie had been one of the 70s horror collection titles that was on the Criterion Collection app through Halloween.
That's right.
They just removed it in December, unfortunately, so it's not on the app anymore. But it really, I was like, oh, I haven't watched this in forever, and I watch it. I'm like, oh wow, I think really I wanted it to show up because I do think it was the best. It was his best role, and there's a little bit of extra tension in there, like you said, because he's getting the character is getting.
Uh-oh. We lost Samir. I'm going to finish the sentence. Getting revenge on critics? Maybe? For those who've seen Wayne's World, remember the part where like they're in the TV studio and Garth's just sitting there alone and the guy's like, remember that part in that movie where the guy's head just exploded and Garth's like, that's what I feel like. Here's Samir is back.
I'm sorry. I don't know why it does that. Sometimes it just does that. But no, what I was saying, so like the character in this movie is getting revenge against critics who he feels didn't really give him his due. And I'm sure in Vincent Price's life, there's probably a little bit of that resentment also, because he really had showed all of these, a wide range of talents in his life. And he sort of became pigeonholed as this horror specialist, sort of the way Anthony Perkins was. Once you capture the public's attention in a certain type of role or a certain role, they can't unsee you in that. And he was just so good because he brought all of that knowledge and, and wealth of knowledge, I would say, like the art historian and the person who could cook fine food and all these Renaissance characteristics really made his characters a richer in even the schlockiest of films. So people could never see him as anything but that. So this is almost like there's a bit of a revenge on audiences who could only see him that way, critics who sort of would filter their view of his work through his horror iconography instead of just viewing the work as it was. But he gets to ham it up so well in this movie, like I said, because he's deceiving people. So as an actor, that gives you the opportunity to play all these different roles in all these different situations. And he is just living so much in each of these little roles. You could tell how much he is relishing this experience. Like, it gives him enough scenery to chew without him ever verging into just being pure camp. So I don't think this movie is campy at all. I think his performance, he's very well-versed theater and stage and screen performer. So I think he knows how to incorporate elements of camp to make things funny. And this movie shifts tone from comedy to like genuine, like gruesome murder horror pretty quickly. Like at first you're kind of laughing, you're going along and sort of indulging in these visuals or this scenario. And then it quickly turns sinister and murderous. And all of the murders from the film all come out of Shakespeare plays. So it's also highlighting just how violent and bloody Shakespeare really is in and of itself too. But it all does it so effortlessly, and it's having so much fun. It doesn't take itself so seriously that it kills the joy of a horror movie. But it's a genuine horror comedy at the highest order, I think, and really would be nothing without his incredible performance in this movie. But also has Diana Rigg, for people who used to watch the Avengers, the show, not the Marvel or whatever it is, Avengers, but like the original actual characters, the Avengers. She was famous for that at this time. And so she's really kind of going against type in this movie with her small role. It's a lot of fun. I think you really, really will like it.
Well, I am looking forward to it again, especially.
Don't read Steven's comment either. Just ignore it. He's ruining something from the film. Please, no spoilers of murder scenes in the comments.
Yeah, no spoilers, Steven. Gosh. Yeah, excited to watch this. This is, as far as I could tell, I could only find this available to rent. So sorry about that, but always watch your movies legally. But yeah, please give this a rent. And yeah, I'm excited to watch Mr. Vincent Price.
Yes, wait till it gets dark outside.
Price. What am I doing? I'm gonna try and get his voice down for tomorrow.
It's a really fun voice. It's like he has this like deep sort of timbre, like mixed with the sibilant nasally quality of the stereotypical quote gay voice. And I appreciated what his daughter actually said about him, because his daughter is, I think, lesbian, so she's actually a member of the community openly. And so she says hesitantly that it appears that her dad was bisexual, but that like her home when she was growing up was always like there were always gay couples that were friends, close friends. So she's like it was completely normal for gay couples, gay people, like all of that was totally normal because that was their circle of friends. And there clearly must have been some kind of arrangement because with his last wife, at least, because I remember that she, I think, was also supposedly bisexual. So I think he really sort of just crafted the life and love lives he wanted. And his daughter remembers just that, he really was just accepting and loving of everybody. But obviously, he was very open when she came out to him. He said, I've known amazing love for men in my life too. And, basically reassuring her that she's still wonderful. And totally, he loves his dog. It's like that was the kind of speech he gave her, was totally opening up to her about that.
He's awesome.
He's just such an awesome person. That story always touches me too. That was always just a part of his life. He was never ashamed of it. He didn't exactly like flaunt it in terms of telling everybody who he was having sex with. But I think people who knew him knew. And Roddy McDowall, another queer actor of that generation, said, when we were coming up, there was no word. Bisexual was not a word. We didn't understand that. We didn't have any knowledge of that. So it's hard to say what he was or wasn't after the fact. When we were coming up, that wasn't even something we ever considered, so they were always something beyond that label in their lifetimes. And so his daughter didn't want to just slap a label on her dad and say this is what he was, because he was so much more than that. So let's all celebrate the magic of Vincent Price, because he is a national treasure.
Yeah.
And he brought horror and art to the masses. And I think that we should all be thankful for that.
What a wonderful person. I hope he's not one of those actors. I mean, I'm assuming if there was some bad things going on with him, I would like to think we would have found out about them by now. But I hope we never find out
them.
About him,
I did not find anything bad.
He's wonderful. Wonderful person. Please watch Theater of Blood tonight. Again, available to rent. Please check out our Patreon. I put those over in the comments. Tomorrow for Director Tuesday, we were talking about British. Actually, no, he's not British. Forgot about that. American, but kind of British as well. Honorary British director Terry Gilliam and his film Brazil, one of his big classics. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. That's a crazy film, very prolific for its time of the things that I don't know. It's interesting to watch that movie now with every I don't know, last several decades and technology and everything like that. But really great film. So join us tomorrow for that, for after the movie discussion of Theater of Blood, followed by Terry Gilliam and Brazil. When stars forever